Hi, everyone. Thanks for taking time to join us for our webinar today, Navigating Business Challenges in the Cannabis Industry. We'll give just a couple more seconds, a little bit of time for people to trickle in. We still got some folks coming in, so.
You let us know.
Okay. All right, I'll kick things off. So for those of you that are just joining us, thanks for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us for our session today, discussing the business challenges that we're facing in the cannabis industry. My name's Rain, and I'm on the marketing team here at SilverLeaf. I wanted to hop on here and just run through a couple things. Everyone's muted throughout the session, but jot down any questions you have as we're going along, and we'll cover those at the end. We'll save some time for Q&A. And the session's being recorded, and it will be sent to you later today, so keep an eye out for that in your inbox. Today's presenters are Sara Silver and Jennifer Phoenix, so I'll hand it over to them, but thank you again for joining us.
Thanks, Rain, and thanks to all of you for joining our session about challenges in the cannabis industry. Today, we're going to tell you about our company, Velocio, and our ERP solution, SilverLeaf, and how SilverLeaf can ultimately be used to solve these challenges. So, as Rain mentioned, I'm Sara Silver, the industry director for horticulture and cannabis, and Jennifer.
And I am the practice director for our BC Enterprise team, Business Central, BC, for our horticulture and cannabis industry. So I deliver on what Sara promises we're going to do.
Something like that, yeah, exactly. So before we get into the industry challenges, I wanted to talk a little bit about our solution, SilverLeaf. SilverLeaf is built on the Microsoft Dynamics Business Central platform, and it adds functionality to this cloud ERP solution specifically for the cannabis industry. Our users then have a single solution for everything, cultivation, production, operations, sales, supply chain, and finance. And it's all built on this world-class mid-market solution, Business Central. In this chart, you can see some of the areas that SilverLeaf impacts. Our solution is multi-entity, and so it supports multi-state operators or companies with complex organizational structures. SilverLeaf will track production costs and provide accurate inventory, so those are some of the finance features. On the inventory side, SilverLeaf provides real-time visibility into inventory and availability, no more hunting in spreadsheets. We also offer strain management, recommended replenishments, and label printing. In production, you'll be able to create production schedules and trace raw materials into finished goods for product safety. We have integrations with LeafLink and a whole chain of custody tracking on the sales side. Much more on sales that's built in Business Central as well. In cultivation, you can do obviously the plant tracking and predict the yield by strain and timeline and things like that. And most important, the solution will meet your regulatory needs, which we'll talk about more today, with our metric integration, destruction tracking, license management, and lab result tracking. So that's a little bit about SilverLeaf at a super high level. So let's talk about the industry challenges. We're going to today talk about maintaining data, track and trace data, security, inventory availability. Cost gets an exclamation point on the agenda because that seems to be the first thing people always say to us is, we don't know what it costs to make our products. So we'll talk about that. And we'll talk about getting timely financial reports and working in the complex org structures that cannabis operators generally have. So let's kick it off with the first challenge. And what we often hear is, I am tied to using my state's track and trace system, and therefore I can't use another software to run my business because I don't want to do duplicate data entry. So Jennifer, help me out here. Let's talk about the things we can do in SilverLeaf with integrations.
So this was really the first thing that we tackled when we decided to develop software for the cannabis industry. And that was, first of all, we know we need to track those metric tags. That's like, now, not every state is a metric state, but I think most of you know that the majority of states who have legalized the cannabis industry use metric as the state track and trace, so we focused on that one first. So being able to create and generate those tags in the system to match up with the tags that you're actually bringing in from metric, so that we can tag the inventory and track it and trace it the way that we need to for you to be compliant, which again, we'll continue to talk about throughout this. So Sarah, if you want to hit that next one for me.
Sorry about that. Yep.
No, that's all right. we swapped this time for this webinar.
Yeah.
So what's really nice is now within Business Central, within the ERP that's attached to a lot of other things, not just in metric, we can now see the tags that we've used, the remaining inventory on that tags, the movements that we've had within the system. So we're able to track those within our ERP. And then also we can reconcile the inventory between the two systems. Obviously, if we're going to integrate with another system, making sure that those two systems stay in sync is really, really important to your business. So we make sure that we have the tools to allow you to do that.
So Jen, can you talk about what happens when the inventory doesn't match in SilverLeaf versus metric?
So we have some options. First and foremost, we don't recommend suddenly banging through an adjustment, although we do have the ability to do that. It's first meant to be information, right, that we can use to, hey, maybe I need to perform an activity that I haven't performed yet. But if things are out of sync and we know that we just need to make an adjustment, we can either tell the systems, hey, the information metric is correct and we need to adjust our inventory within Business Central to match, or we can do it the other way around. Ideally we have the SilverLeaf and Business Central as a single source of truth and pushing that information to metric, but sometimes things happen and metric might actually have the correct information, and we know a lot of you really rely on that. So we have the ability to adjust it back.
Great, thanks. All right, and if you have any questions, put them in the chat and we can cover them at the end too. So challenge number 2, I worry about security and audit trail. I never know who's changed the data in my spreadsheets. And I know if you're using Google Sheets, you kind of see who did stuff, but there's really no control over who can go in and edit things. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the security and audit trail features in SilverLeaf and Business Central.
So one of the great benefits of using something like SilverLeaf in an ERP is you have the ability to really set up parameters within parameters within which each person can work. I don't know how I wanted to structure that sentence there. But
pretty good.
The idea is that we can set up specific job roles. In this example here that we have on the screen, Aaron is allowed to perform certain activities that maybe somebody else cannot. And so we can control that within the system. So if we have certain people who can create orders, but other people who can post them, or invoices, or moving inventory around, or adjusting inventory like we talked about before, we can control who has the power to do that, right? So that we make sure we have the right people doing the right jobs. And then as we kind of lead into, I guess, the next bit there, we can see who makes what changes. So we have registers in the system just natively in here. At the top there you see in the blue, the GL register. So every transaction that's performed within the system is tracked. And then we can dive a little deeper. We can see the user ID associated with that. But in SilverLeaf, we kind of took another step forward, and we really wanted to dive into the details of who changed exactly which field at what time. And so you can see here that we're showing a record was changed, and we can see that the credit limit on a customer was changed. Who did that? And then we can trace that back and make sure we have that audit trail that we need to, especially when it comes to major system configuration changes.
I love this one. Jennifer's heard this story a million times, but usually what happens when a customer goes live with the data, with a new system, they're unsure and uncertain, and they'll often say, your system changed the credit limit on this customer. And this way we were able to show them, well, here's who changed it. And at least they can then train someone or change the permissions if that person wasn't supposed to do that. And then assuming everyone made the changes, you gave the security and we track the changes, there's still one last step. Why don't you talk about this, Jen?
Yeah, so we have the ability to introduce approvals throughout the process. So you might have certain people who can only place purchase orders up to a single limit, or maybe before an invoice is posted, somebody has to approve it, or before we put an item out and make published for active use, somebody has to approve that. So we have the ability to set up approver chains or approval limits, approver people, and introduce some more kind of stop checkpoints along the way before things can happen in the system that might cause a mess later down the road. We like to avoid the mess.
Right. Yeah, I'm going to back up 2 slides. I do want to point out one thing, since we're going to talk about multi-company. When we assign permissions, notice, and I don't know if you can see my mouse in this company column, you can assign what permissions they have in which company. So maybe some users can do certain things in one company, maybe not in another company, maybe they can't even get into that company, or they can only have read-only access in there. So as we set up these different entities to support your org structure, we can assign permissions accordingly.
That's a good point.
Yeah, thought I'd bounce back on that. Okay, we ready for the next one, Jennifer?
Oh, bring it on. Bring on the challenges, Sarah.
Bring it on. Do I have enough inventory to meet my demand? And this is all about what's coming up. And we meet a lot of cannabis operators who have like a PhD in Google Sheets. They've got so many things tied together, and it's all, the information's there, but it's really hard to drill into and maintain. So let's talk about visibility in our solution.
One of the things that's great is, with using something like SilverLeaf and Business Central, we're doing ideally everything in real time, right? So everything is at a click of a button. We don't have to wait for somebody to key it in later, because in order to move the inventory, we have to perform these functions. So what Sara's showing up here is right when we log into the system, we can have roles that give us visibility to important information that we need in order to understand what's happening with our business. And so in this case, we're looking at a cultivation role where we're seeing, the active plant batches that we have for immature plants, for mature plants, what we're harvesting. We can see, Sara, you're really great at talking about some of these charts at the bottom. Do you want to speak a little bit to those?
Yeah, so in that expected harvest chart where I grabbed the screenshot with my mouse hovering over the information, it's showing us what we predict our yield in grams to be by strain by month. And so we can see we've got critical mass, northern lights, and purple haze in different quantities. And I realize my timeline is kind of stretched out, that we have things growing that are due to be harvested in December through August. I'm a little lazy with some of my data, but this is giving us, just right on our homepage of Business Central, visibility into what's going on in our cultivation area. We also can see the cultivation inventory by phase, so I can see what's going on with each plant, and this would tell us the number of plants, I believe, in each phase. Then there's another one that shows us by room. So this is just a quick snapshot that gives you great visibility, and you can change this to look at it by week, by day, whatever makes sense to you. So let's see what's next. All right.
This is where we really start to get into the kind of the meat of it, right? So we're looking at an item card, bulk trim here, and we're able to see, we can navigate to so much information. So right in that middle section there where it says inventory, we can see the inventory that we have on hand. We have what we call QC, available and unavailable inventory, meaning as we track results and lab results on tested inventory, we don't let it become available till we know that it's passed testing. So here we can see how much are we waiting for test results or didn't pass test results versus what's available and has passed QC. We can see what's on order on purchase orders, what we have inbound, what we have demand for on sales orders, as well as anything that's going to be used in production of other items. And then if we drill into it further in that bottom screenshot there, we can see all the ins and outs of activities, but then you can even see in that little, what we call a fact box on the right-hand side, I can see the test results for any entry within my system in my, what we call the item ledger, which are all the inbound and outbound activities. So we really can see where our inventory is now, but how it got there, as well as where it's going, is what I'm trying to say. It's too early for me on the West Coast to have all the
me too. So. We got these numbers. I mean, we just popped up an item and just start clicking around. I think you'll find in Business Central, you're less beholden to printed reports, and it's more about a drilling or dashboard, sort of more visual experience.
Yeah, the curious mind can have a lot of fun here. And whenever you see that blue, that means that's something we can drill into and see details behind it.
I'd say it's green, but whatever color it is.
Teal. Okay, teal.
Teal. So the other challenge we talked about, understanding if you have enough inventory to meet your demand. And so we showed you how you can get visibility and drill into your inventory. But now let's talk a little bit about the demand forecast and how that's used.
Right, so this is something that allows us to plan our production, plan what we need to grow, plan what we need to produce. And so here we're able to put in a forecast, so we can plan to what is actually out there and the actual demand that we have on sales orders, for example, right, based on what's going to come in. But we can also preset our expectations in the system so that we can plan ahead to those things. Sarah, was there more that you kind of wanted to add about that?
No, and then what happens with this demand forecast, then it's all fed into our planning tool, which will look at your real demand, your forecasted demand, your open purchase orders, open production, and basically tell you what you need to purchase or produce over a time frame so that you end up not having out of stocks. I mean, a big cost we hear a lot about is people all of a sudden realize they're out of something critical and they're air freighting it in, or they have to delay a sale because they don't have enough packaging or something like that. So this will explode all the way down to what kind of bulk material you need for extraction or packaging material and help you determine what you need to buy or make to meet that demand. And so, if you have things you're importing, let's say you're importing cartridges, you would run your planning tool out several months so you can get big orders together over a time frame, and it's going to take a while to get here. But if you want to look at what you need to package, how much flour you want to put in different size jars, you could do that over a short term as well. All right, challenge number 4. Oh, it's my favorite, Jen. You live for this stuff.
I do.
What does it cost to make my products? What is my inventory worth? And again, you can build it out in a spreadsheet, but you need to maintain that data. It's, again, fragile with a bunch of links looking things up, and costs are changing all the time. So let's talk about how SilverLeaf and Business Central can help with costing.
Yeah, talking about this makes my former controller heart really happy.
Yeah.
So
this is a screen you just were born for.
Right. So what's really cool, we can support different costing methods. So a lot of you come from, say, a FIFO model or standard cost, and let me say, I have seen some really impressive spreadsheets that help to devise the cost. But usually what's happening is then we're calculating it all in a spreadsheet, and then we are making manual adjustments to the financials to record the value of that inventory. And in SilverLeaf, everything is connected, which really just streamlines the work and is always giving us an accurate picture of the value of our inventory, which we'll talk a little bit more on the next slide, at any given point in time. So what we're seeing here is how we can actually build, we put in our bill of materials, what is it that we use to make, obviously, and at each layer, these costs compound so that we can see at the very top level what the value of our inventory is when we finish producing a 10-pack of gummies, but we can see where all those costs came from along the way. And we can make sure at each step of the way that we're capturing those costs correctly. And those costs can be made up of, or we can include in the value of our inventory, the value of inventory products that are being used to make those things, as well as labor, overhead, all of that. So we can include all of those things to get a true picture of the value of our inventory and record it accurately on our financials without having to do manual adjustments. It all happens automatically. And the system does some really smart things where if I put in the cost of all my components and I put in the cost of my labor, it then knows, based on all the layers that we've created, how to roll those costs up and value it at that top level. That was a push of a button when Sarah got all her data in.
Yeah, this just happened. And in fact, a real world example, when I first was looking at this, the cost per package was like $250. And I'm like, I think that's wrong. And I realized I had set up my work center. I measured my time in minutes, but had put my cost in by hours. And so it, just like that planning tool we were talking about before, you can look at it, you can drill into it, and you can find out, oh, here's where my error was. And and keep improving your data. So, okay. So let's talk about inventory valuation.
Yeah, so this is what I was talking about earlier, where everything just automatically ties to the GL as long as you don't mess with it, right? If you let the system do what it does. So here we have an example of an inventory valuation report, which is based on all of the inventory transactions and the costs we have associated with them. And if we look at our associated general ledger account for our inventory, we can see that these numbers match. And another thing that I think a lot of times people really want to know is what the profitability is of their inventory. And what's really cool is we can measure that profitability all the way down to the particular item / SKU level. And in fact, I could probably even say even further to the item and strain level. So each transaction that I occur, if I sell, 1,000 units of Blue Dream, whatever that unit is, right? I can see how that might compare to Purple Haze, for example, right? And am I making a bigger profit on one of those versus the other if I'm tracking costs differently for each of those different strains? So it gets very nuanced and a lot of available data that you can use to manage your business.
Great. Jen, for the financial heads on the call, can you describe the difference in interim versus regular inventory, the two inventory accounts we have there?
Yeah, so that's what we would call tracking expected costs, meaning so in this case, that's finished goods. So that's the value of the inventory that has sold, but we haven't yet invoiced it, right? We can also track inventory that we bring in. So if I receive inventory, right, that immediately has value to me. If the building burned down, I want that on my insurance claim, but even if I haven't paid the vendor. So we're able to track those interim costs to, again, have that true picture. And we can adjust the setup so that they record it in the right place on the balance sheet and in the P&L to make sure that we understand where that inventory really is and what state it's in. Is it paid for, or have we just received it and we're waiting for that final invoice?
Yeah, what's cool is you can receive something, start using it in production, but maybe you haven't gotten the vendor invoice yet, and I'm dumbing this down because it's how I understand it. It'll all catch up with itself. So a lot of other systems, you're not able to kind of recognize the inventory until you're ready to invoice it from your vendor or you've received all your cost information. So that's a nice plus.
Yeah, the system always makes sure it all balances out in the end. So again, for you financial people, you can appreciate that. I like everything to tick and tie.
Yeah. I mean, it's back in the day in older ERPs, we used to spend a lot of time reconciling things, and Business Central has a lot of controls to keep you from hurting yourself, as long as you set it up. All right, next challenge. I can't quickly see the financial health of my business. And, I'm sure a lot of you are living this life. You've got, all these different systems, and then you gather the data, get it over to finance, and then they're going to start doing their work. And it's hard to know the health of your business easily without I'd say daily acts of heroism, basically. So,
well, and a lot of times I hear from customers who are on, say, I'm just going to use this as an example, the QuickBooks and Google Sheets model. It takes them 15 days to close the month, right? And coming to an ERP, they're looking to speed up that process. Now, we don't always have to wait till the month is closed, which is awesome about Business Central, to be able to see where things are at, provided, again, everybody's doing their jobs in real time as we would assume you'd want them to do. So like we showed earlier with, say, our cultivation role center, this is a financial-based role center where I can see, what are my outstanding sales orders, purchase orders. I can monitor specific accounts that really kind of indicate where things are standing with my business. What's my cash? What are my outstanding receivables, payables? What's the value of my inventory on hand? Oh, I skipped to the very last chart, Sarah. Sorry about that.
Okay, I'm going to show it all.
Yeah, we have these little dashboards that give us sort of mini financial reports without having to go through a whole process and a month end to be able to present those. And there are many more than that. Business Central, SilverLeaf is very strong in finance and reporting as it relates to that. This is just an example of what you can see the minute you open the system.
Love that.
So on this next slide, we have an extra
I had to see what was coming next.
Yeah. So one of the things that we really like to be able to do is look at our financials. And this is an example just using revenue, how we can look at things different ways. So with SilverLeaf, we have something that we call dimensions. Not everybody totally gets this right out of the box, so I'll try to keep it really simple. But just think about it as ways that you want to categorize your data. A lot of times if you're in QuickBooks, you might be segmenting accounts, right, for different departments, which is a kind of a two-dimensional look at it. We're able to kind of give it multiple dimensions by giving you all these different ways you can classify your data, and we can assign them to customers and items, and each transaction we can kind of capture more information than just what's the item, what's the GL account. So here in this example, we're showing how we can use dimensions to see what was my revenue by territory. So all of my transactions, my sales transactions, I associated a territory with it. So I can look at the data that way. Or I can click a couple buttons and say, no, you know what, I actually want to look at my revenue by product line. I can do this with costs, I can do this with profitability, I can do this with all of my expenses. So we can slice and dice this data in so many ways. And again, on these, I dumped these into Excel for these screenshots, but we can look at these directly in the system, and we can do that thing where we drill in and find out what makes up the cannabis revenue for Northern California, or what were my concentrate sales, and what transactions and what customers did I sell them to. We can dive all the way down into those details.
And we could do, we don't have a shot of it, but we could do territories down the side and product lines across the top, and see which of our product lines are selling in which territory. Or maybe one of your salespeople, you could do salespeople as a dimension. Maybe one of your salespeople isn't selling one of your product lines, and maybe you realize, oh, they need training on that, or you're going to have a little promo to push it or something like that. So you can really slice and dice all kinds of ways without a super complex chart of accounts.
All right, we better speed through this next challenge so we have enough time for a couple questions.
Yeah. Oh, my company is actually separate entities, and we've alluded to this a few times. You know, we've got customers with 50 entities. I think one has over 100 entities. And we recognize in the cannabis industry, organizational structure is very complex. So go ahead, Jen. This is really, again, your specialty on the financial.
So what we're seeing on the left here is just, we can set up as many companies, actually up to 300, that we need in one single database. And this little box on the left just kind of shows you we can easily switch between them. This is actually a recent update in Business Central that made people so happy. We used to have to click a little gear and change it and whatnot. Now we can just say, click this one button and go to the company that I want. And so I can easily navigate, again, provided I have the permissions to do that. What we're seeing on the right there is kind of an example of how we can set up the relationships between companies. So if I need to transact between let's say I have a global packaging entity that does all the packaging, and then I need to transact with my cannabis entity, I can do that, and I can send stuff back and forth. Sarah, if we jump to that next screen, we can also make purchases and allocate things to different entities. So we can, here in this example, we bought shipping supplies, and they're just expense. We're not worrying about the inventory or anything like that, but we're routing the various expenses to another entity and paying for it over here. So we're able to do a lot of coordination in that respect. And it gets more complicated. I won't bore you with those details today.
Well, I think there's several layers to the intercompany functionality, right? There's, you can, assign expenses across companies like we're seeing here. You can do buying and selling, as you mentioned. So you might you might have a central company for purchasing of non-cannabis products, and then each company buys, for example, the packaging from the parent purchasing company.
Yeah, and it sets up all the intercompany liabilities and receivables to do, what each company owes each other, and then so that you can balance it all back to zero. Again, making my accounting heart happy.
Yeah, that's all we want. And we want the good balance. And then, of course, you can run consolidated financials. So you can really,
and roll everything up. Yeah.
Several things with the intercompany functionality. So with that, we got through our challenges. Rain, do we have any questions from the audience? Oh, you're muted. I don't hear you.
There I am. I jotted them down. They're hard to read. Just to clarify, yes, the session was recorded and it will be in your inbox later today. So I'll make sure you get that. Someone asked, how long does a solution like SilverLeaf take to be implemented?
So I'm going to give you the classic, it depends, but I'll give you an idea. So, I would say our typical implementations, I used to say 3 to 4 months, but the industry is growing and becoming a lot more complex and a lot more mature. And I would say now probably 5 or 6 months is kind of our sweet spot for the standard implementation. If we're doing more, it goes longer. We're doing less, it goes shorter. It really depends on who we're working with. And we also really want to work at our customers' pace. What do they have time to do while they're managing their very busy day jobs, wearing all the hats that I know many people in these companies do.
I think that's what we see the most is it's just so hard to get focused. So we look for a team that's led by someone who has authority to allocate time and keep things moving, because otherwise it could just really drag on.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Don asked, if we're using QuickBooks now, is there a way to export and then import all of that data?
So typically what we do with the ERP is we definitely bring over enough data so that you can report on it. We don't necessarily bring in every transaction. So we'll start with beginning balances, and then we'll bring over all the open stuff. So what receivables are outstanding, what payables, and the inventory. That's kind of that key critical piece, right? We develop our starting inventory. We can do more detail. We often find that tends to be a little bit more than what most people need and or want to pay for, to be perfectly honest. So this is a lot of times an opportunity for a really beautiful, clean start, and we often want to take advantage of that.
Yeah. Someone said, if we're not currently on Microsoft, do you have to be to use SilverLeaf?
No, we can help you with that. Yeah, so no, that's what Velocio here does. We have a whole team of people who can support getting you up and running. And you don't have to use the Microsoft Office and all of that. There are certainly advantages to doing that because we have integrations to Business Central, so working with that. But we have plenty of customers who still love Google Suite and Slack and don't want to change over to Microsoft Office and Teams and still use Business Central.
Lastly, we had someone ask, do you have to have, so I think you were just talking about a little bit about what Velocio does, but do you have to have an internal IT staff?
Oh, that's a great question. No, the beauty of this solution is it's in the cloud, right? So you really don't. We do have some bells and whistles that we can add on that sometimes it's helpful to have a technical resource, but really the goal is that we can provide what you need on that front. The old days when you had to have an on-premise server and you had to install everything there, that required a lot more in-house technical expertise. But now we're able to spin up customers who don't have an IT department, and we're able to just deploy it in the cloud.
Our larger customers still have IT. I mean, definitely have an IT team because, of course, you're still getting the computers and getting them on the network and getting them. There might be other internal tools you have. But with SilverLeaf on Business Central in the cloud, that app won't be demanding as much of their time once they're onboarded. But what we see in a lot of companies, the IT team is deployed a little differently. They start getting into, maybe Internet of Things sort of integrations with other tools, and they're just doing different things. So
that's what I was just thinking. It scales, it scales that partnership.
Yeah, they get to. They get to work on a lot more interesting things. I haven't met a single IT person who says, I really love doing ERP support. So they can work on, things that are dear to their heart, and Business Central will, as long as the users can get to the internet, it should take care of itself.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's all the questions that we had. So thank you again to everyone that joined us today, and keep an eye out for the recording. But if you think of another question, send those over to insider@silverleafcbc.com. Thank you all.
All right. Thanks so much. There we are. Okay. Thanks, Ray.